Would it be okay if your beliefs changed as a result of increased wisdom? Hi, my name is Jeff Miles. I am here with Glenn Johnson from Jabez Financial, and this is the Manumit Podcast. You can check us out online at themanumitpodcast.com or at jabezfinancial.com. Glenn, how are you this morning?
Spectacular. Thank you.
That's good to hear. That quote that I just read is from a Forbes article that you wrote not too long ago. And I would say it probably describes how you like to, I would say, kind of guide people with their financial retirement plans.
That's right. You know, it's really comes down to how you think, because people will never act in opposition to their belief system for any extended period of time. That's kind of like when you get some good advice from somebody and you say, okay, I'm going to do this. But if your underlying belief system isn't in line with it, inevitably, you will ultimately self-sabotage and resort back to your underlying belief system. So to see any kind of prolonged growth or permanent change, our belief systems need to change. And when we have an emotional attachment to our beliefs, that's where we have our identity. So when we're outside of that, that's what really tears us apart.
If you've ever read the book Four Agreements, this is kind of sort of the difference between objective and subjective, right? So we all live in our own subjective world. And there's only one point in time ever in our own individual history when we were truly objective, and that is the day we were born. From that point forward, everything that you know is learned from growing up, basically. I mean, even the point of how to eat.
And it's interesting, the way in which we learn, whatever it is that we learn first, that's what we believe to be true. Mm-hmm. Everything that our parents told us when we were growing up as a young child, we accepted as truth because we're naturally accepting people. And so therefore, we collect this knowledge bank, and as time goes on, when we get new information, we compare it to what's previously stored. And if it doesn't line up, we view it with skepticism and doubt and distrust. Yet, it's very well possible that what we learned first was incorrect.
Exactly. A lot of people don't necessarily want to consider it that way because when we learn something for the very first time, like you said, we accept it as the truth. And the challenge of that, well, that's impossible that's not the truth because that's not the way I was taught. And,
right.
If we don't have the ability, I've always looked at things. My father was a college professor, and he is someone who looks at the idea of learning literally starts with the idea of how to think. And if you can't think from a position of I could be wrong, then you're not thinking correctly.
That's right. That's exactly right. And oftentimes if I'm doing some marriage counseling or something, one of the bits of advice that I give is to be able to articulate somebody else's experience. And you can start that by saying, correct me if I'm wrong, but what I'm hearing from my understanding, it's XYZ.
Right.
And so when we can start to articulate what somebody else is feeling or experiencing, now we're able to identify with them, and it brings down the walls of defense so that people can get on the same page. And I'll add something because what happens over time with, you take a married couple financially, when they start out, when they first meet, generally speaking, they're kind of on the same page with their spending habits.
Right.
But there's a little difference. Like one of them may tend to spend a little bit more than the other, and the other one tends to be a little bit tighter with the money. And unless they're on the same page, as time goes on, they will overcompensate for each other. The person that starts to spend spends even more. The person that gets tighter gets even tighter. And it drives that wedge because they're not on the same page.
You just gave me a huge insight into my own marriage. Because and you're absolutely right. My wife and I have been together for 20 years, and I will tell you that I'm a golfer. And so I spend in the world of golf, which is not necessarily the cheapest sport to play. And I would say that over the last 20 years, it's very possible that she has learned to spend less because when you look at your bank account, you know what your threshold of secure is. And you start to adjust based off of what the other person's doing, right?
Exactly. And so we learn to live with a certain level of financial stress. So, for example, if you ever have a windfall when you get a pile of money that comes in, you think, oh, this is fantastic. And then
Changes my life forever.
it's gone. Exactly. And it's gone in a heartbeat. Then there's also times when so we've gone through some financial hardship and we're like, whoa, this isn't right. And we step it up. But we tend to stay in that certain amount of financial stress. When things get too good, we self-sabotage. When things get too bad, we step it up. So, and actually to increase our quality of life and increase our lifestyle sustainably, we have to be willing to step out into that next level and then stay there long enough so that it becomes comfortable.
You know, you are the kind of person that as I talk to about finance, my retirement, let's say, down the road, what that looks like. I think one of the biggest differences with Glenn, with what you're offering is a different perspective, and it's more a philosophical type of perspective, because I'm a why person. Like, I'm not the person that can walk into a financial advisor's office and say, hey, I've got this amount of money. I need to know if you're going to be able to make this last for me until my days are done, basically. And I can't walk away from that and say, all right, cool, you've got it. Just let me know. I can't be that person. I need to know why. And you're the why guy.
Yeah, that's right. Well, when you learn how your brain works and understanding that your quality of life isn't determined by the number of commas in your bank account.
Right.
Your quality of life is determined by what you think about and how you feel about it. And that's only going to come from developing the right kind of confidence, self-esteem, self-image, hope in the future. I think when the late Zig Ziglar said, when there's hope in the future, there's power in the present.
Right.
And so when we have a more optimistic perspective of our future, that affects our attitude, and then our attitude affects what we do, which ultimately determines our future. So when we learn how our brains work and the type of thought patterns we have the free will to choose new thought patterns.
Right.
And so that's why when you open the podcast with the question, would it be okay if your beliefs changed as a result of increased wisdom? That's the question that we have to ask ourselves so that we can redirect our thought patterns.
What I love about that quote, by the way, because I've always had this thought process, this thought pattern. And it's funny, as we're sitting here and we're talking about, retirement and setting up for retirement and financial planning, I think most people kind of have it ingrained in their mind of kind of how that's supposed to work. Even people who've never talked to a financial advisor about it before, but you kind of have this idea in your head, well, I'm going to get Social Security. I've got a 401k. I've got, a couple of other things that are going on. And then, I might have a pension, but other than that, I should be okay. And that's not necessarily the case. But my thought process has kind of always been, and this is with anything, I'm kind of a natural skeptic. I call myself the optimistic pessimist, because I literally go into things and I'm like, I hope that you can prove me wrong somehow, because if you can't, then at least I have exhausted my possibilities of trying to figure out what I have the opinion on. Does that make sense? But you have a much more positive way of spinning that.
Yeah. Well, of all the opinions in the world, I like mine the most.
Correct. I think we all do, right? At least we should.
That's true. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah.
And the thing is, our minds are wired to be able to have an opinion, whether it's based on anything at all.
Right.
It's kind of like if you pull over and you ask somebody for directions, that person, whether they know or not, they feel like, wow, I should probably know because I'm being asked.
Right.
And when we need to make these decisions, and whether our opinions are based on fact or not, we're going to make the decision.
Right.
And so what happens is we go through life making one decision after another. And when our decisions aren't based in truth, they're based in oftentimes just pursuing comfort.
Right.
If our decisions aren't based in truth, we end up with results that we're not looking for. And over time, we end up losing confidence in our own ability to make a decision. And this is why people, as they get older, they can become mentally paralyzed.
Yes.
Because of the lifestyle of their decision-making process. They've lost their trust in their own judgment. And so there's a couple of things to unpack from that, which is, one, start making decisions based on truth.
Right.
And then have an increasing desire for what's accurate and what's true over what's comfortable.
That's a hard part for a lot of people, because comfortable is the ultimate decider there in whether or not you're going to actually go through with it, I would say.
Right. And that's why, just like where it says, we're guaranteed life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It's funny. Happiness is no guarantee.
There's no guarantee in the happiness. It's the pursuit of happiness that we're guaranteed. But there's no guaranteed happiness, right?
Right. There isn't. I mean, so when you have happiness, great. If you don't, oh, well.
Yeah.
Another interesting thing is the original document did not say pursuit of happiness. It was life, liberty, and property.
Right.
Yeah.
Completely different than the pursuit of happiness that we see today.
That's right.
I would say.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Glenn, I'm so excited about this podcast that we are starting that is going to be just a great outlet for people, not only for their retirement, not only for their retirement planning, but if you are retired currently, you're going to want to listen, because there's going to be a lot of information here that you're going to be able to give people as far as, what's going on in the world right now. The market's doing this. I'm sure you probably have clients that every time there's something that goes weird or haywire in the market, they're probably on the phone with you. Oh my gosh, I just saw this. And this is where you come in and put them at ease.
Exactly, because every experience that we have today, whether we're watching something on TV or seeing something on our phone,
right,
everything is emotionally driven.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're emotionally dodging bullets, it's tough to come up with a long-range plan.
Right.
And that's the main objective, is distraction. In the midst of being distracted and in the midst of being in an emotionally heightened state, I remember about 30 years ago, I read in a Reader's Digest article about a magician. He said the most common tactic magicians use is if you give people a choice, they believe they've acted freely.
Uh-huh.
Because I would relate that to, like, if you offer your kids, what do you want for dinner? Do you want hamburger or pasta? The kids think they're making a decision, but ultimately, now, who do you want to vote for, A or B?
Well, and it's interesting because that who you want to vote for, the same way as what do you want for dinner, A or B, has implications on what happens once you've chosen A or B.
That's right. That's right. So this is where we have to get good at being able to collect the information necessary to make the wisest decisions possible, so that as time goes on, we're not living in regret or remorse of any sort. And when we get good at accumulating the right knowledge from the right sources, and we're basing our decisions based on truth, it passes the sleep well test. So that regardless of what's going on in society, and no matter how things may change, and they change overnight,
they do,
we'll still be okay.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes me think of, like I said, with all the laws changing and the election and all these things, we have to be positioned personally, whether it be not just financially, but mentally and emotionally. We need to be positioned financially on solid ground.
Right.
So that whatever happens, regardless of which directions things may go, we'll still be okay.
It won't completely disrupt us emotionally to the point of, what am I going to do now?
Right. And so, because that puts us in a box of being a victim. Because if our circumstance and our quality of life is determined by the decisions of somebody else, now we're just left to have to deal with whatever happens.
Right.
And
nobody wants to live that way.
That's not the case.
And nobody
That's
wants,
right.
Yeah, nobody wants to live where all my life is just at the outcome of someone else's decisions, and I have no choice in that. So,
yeah, people are not a victim of circumstance.
Glenn, what is your website once again for people to come? They can check out everything you have. By the way, when you go to his website, please read these articles that you've written for Forbes magazine.
Great. The website is Jabez Financial, Jabez as in zebra, Jabez Financial.
And this is the Manumit podcast. You can actually check it out online at theManumitPodcast.com. Coming up in the next episode, which will basically be kind of the first episode as we get into the financial planning aspect of things, we're going to talk about some recent announcements that have been made about Social Security, how that could be or not be changing as far as, is it going to run out? This has been honestly a question that people have been having for decades now. Is it going to run out? When is it going to run out? There have been a couple of announcements recently that tell us a little bit about when that might be. So we'll talk about that in the next episode. In the meantime, go check out Glenn's website. Glenn, it has been a pleasure, and this is going to be a fun podcast to host with you. I'm Jeff Miles. Glenn, have an awesome day.
Thank you. You too.
Investment advisory services offered through JBES Financial LLC, a registered investment advisor firm. Registration is not an endorsement by securities regulators. By contacting us, you may be provided with information about insurance products, including annuities, offered through Glenn Johnson Connecticut Insurance, license number 4628409. The firms are separate entities. Annuity guarantees rely on the financial strength and claims-paying ability of the issuing insurance company and are not offered by JBES Financial LLC. Read your contract for restrictions, limitations, or penalties. JBES Financial LLC is not licensed in all 50 states. To find out if JBES Financial LLC is licensed in your state, please call 860-390-0093.